Good evening. We are here in the encampment, the Pro-Palestinian encampment here in Hi, we're here with Camilo Perez Bustillo, who's going to who's going to talk in a moment. Hi, Camilo.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be participating here as an expert witness on the issue of the law of genocide, crimes against humanity, the war crimes, mass human rights crimes that we're seeing unfold in Gaza. This is a people's tribunal convened by the organizers of the encampment and specifically by the law students and others who are involved in this extraordinary process that we're so honored to be able to accompany. This is adapting the People's Tribunal that was previously organized in Castro Valley on March 30th. This is another version of that, and it's going to be we're going to be putting Stanford University on trial for its complicity in those crimes, in genocide, in crimes against humanity, in war crimes in Gaza and Palestine.
Y para aquellos que nos están siguiendo en español, estamos en el, no, está bien en inglés, ahora en español, estamos en el campamento Pro-Palestina instalado aquí en la Universidad de Stanford con nuestro querido amigo, colega Camilo Pérez Bustillo. Camilo, si nos pudieras resumir todo en español también, por favor.
Claro, estamos acá para exigir la rendición de cuentas de la Universidad de Stanford por su complicidad en genocidio, crímenes de lesa humanidad y crímenes de guerra en Gaza y Palestina. Se va a realizar un tribunal popular organizado por los activistas que han convocado esta iniciativa extraordinaria del campamento que nos rodea en estos momentos en el corazón del campus de Stanford, que es una de las universidades más prestigiadas y más poderosas en Estados Unidos y en el mundo. Muchas gracias. Es un honor poder acompañarlos.
Gracias.
Disculpen, que nos están convocando aquí.
Sí. Oh. Thank you. And this is work in collaboration with Global Exchange, Social Focus, and Peninsula 360 Press.
Stanford thinks they can send us an email threatening suspension, threatening OCS, and something that Stanford genocide, to condemn complicity in genocide, to condemn war is precisely what we will be practicing, that free speech, in today's People's Tribunal. And so welcome to the People's Tribunal. Today in the People versus Stanford University, the people petitioned to charge Stanford University with humanity and war crimes inflicted upon the Palestinian people by the Israeli state. Corporations or universities avenues for true justice. Convening jurors from around the world, or our community of which Stanford is beholden to adjudicate. Specifically, there investigate U.S. government interventions and war crimes in Vietnam in the 1960s, and since have blossomed elsewhere, from a 1973 tribunal on Latin America, the 1976 tribunal on the U.S.-backed coup in Chile, power, bring attention. Prosecutor Itliong, Prosecutor Louverture, Prosecutor Lee Boggs, and Prosecutor Ture. Law. Susan Powers, Head of Legal Research and Advocacy at Al Haq. Carlos Enrique, a researcher in the Divestment Coalition. And Yusuf, a Galton Stanford student. We begin with the opening statement.
To quote Palestinian legal scholar Rabea Igbaria, genocide is a crime. All academia, especially in the US, has been chilling. It is much easier. The smell of death has dissipated and moral clarity is no longer urgent. End quote. As a people's tribunal, we must go against the grain of the law for what is not a debate, but an ongoing genocide found as such, recognized by not just the people going through it themselves, but their and recently by the highest in Palestine. The International Court of Justice has found it. It is plausible that Israel is committing genocide upon Palestinians in a recent case brought Palestine versus the Biden administration. Legal administrators, judges all across the world, alongside the people themselves, have acknowledged this ruling, and the court itself has implored the Biden administration to stop its complicity in genocide. The U.S.'s complicity in genocide is a crime as defined in the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, ratified and signed into by the U.S. on November 5th, 1988. The U.S. and its agents, not simply the U.S. government, or preventing the stories of its survivors and their allies from being told. Stanford University is complicit in two ways, both as a corporation chartered in the US and for its individual myriad investments into corporations funding genocide, such as Lockheed Martin and Microsoft. At the conclusion of this proceeding, we will ask that you all hear the jury at which Stanford is beholden to find Stanford guilty for its complicity in genocide. I'll now pass it on to the next prosecutor.
We are here to interrogate Stanford. So, what is Stanford? It's an elite institution, it's a research hub, it's a place to live, a place to play sports, it's some sandstone fortress with palm tree lined streets. But what is it really? Stanford is supposed to be a school, it's a university. And universities have special responsibilities because of their academic functions and responsibilities. Universities have funding and investments and returns on investments. Stanford is a taxpayer with benefits and exemptions. One would like to assume One would like to assume that Stanford might be a rule follower. So we are here to bring up not simply rules, but laws and duties that Stanford, as a university, are obligated to follow. We will bring in the frameworks of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes at the place of convergence between international law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law, and international human rights law. Specifically, Stanford's failure to Louverture, named after the Haitian general and revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, who led a militant revolution against the French colonists. Stanford both refuses to prevent and is actively complicit in unfolding genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes facilitated, funded, and/or supported by the U.S. and Israel and Gaza and Palestine and elsewhere in the world. These complicities are held in the form of specific programs, partners, and activities that Stanford is entangled with through its research, contracts, investments, and academic programs. As a federally and state-sanctioned nonprofit corporate trust, Stanford is obligated to fulfill their duties to prevent and resist genocide. As a university imposed on land seized from indigenous people through a settler colonial land grant, Stanford is morally indebted to fulfill their duties to prevent and resist genocide. And as an institution entrusted with protecting and advocating for their student body and upholding the larger value of education alongside universities everywhere, it is in Stanford's interests to prevent and resist scholasticide and cut its complicit ties. Fulfill its duty to prevent and resist genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. We suggest, no, we demand that Stanford divest and disclose. Stanford must release its full current scope of all of its institutional activities, policies, programs, investment, including its specific ties to Hewlett Packard, Lockheed Martin, and Chevron, and the respective complicit industries, which have direct links to the genocide of Palestinians by Israel. While Stanford intentionally obfuscates information about which companies in which it is invested, their corporate affiliation programs are public. Stanford's corporate program means that in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars, these complicit corporations receive direct access to Stanford faculty, access to recruitment pipeline of undergrads and grad students, research and poster presentations produced by the department, and associated prestige. We reiterate, Stanford must disclose and divest.
At the end of this trial, we ask that you, the jury, find Stanford University and its actors guilty for the complicity in
Our first witness, an expert in international law, takes the stand.
Okay. Please state your name and your occupation.
Camilo Perez Bustillo. I'm the executive director of the National Lawyers Guild in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm a professor of law in Mexico, Taiwan, and the U.S., specialized in international law, the law of genocide, of crimes against humanity, and war crimes.
You ready to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. So Camilo, what is the legal definition of genocide?
The key thing about social group or other group differentiated from others by their identity and by a condition of that convention, which was a treaty first adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in December of 1948. December 9th, 1948.
And is the U.S. beholden to this definition of genocide?
The UN's Genocide Convention has 153 state parties. That means those are states around the world that are signatories to the convention, which is adopted into their domestic law as a treaty. Israel and the US are both state parties to the Genocide Convention, and the Genocide Convention was ratified as a treaty by the US Senate in 1986, signed by then President Reagan, and in 1988, Joseph R. Biden became incorporated.
Expert witness in past people's tribunals, such as those right close to us in San Castro Valley. But there, did we find that the U.S. was complicit in genocide? Can you tell us a little bit about that ruling?
Absolutely. And I think the clear thing about this that's really important to emphasize, as was emphasized in the opening arguments, is that there is already a finding of plausible genocide at the threshold by the highest international court of that so also a finding. The federal court, presided by Judge White, in his opinion, the ICJ's factual finding of genocide, and Judge White himself said in the text of his opinion that there was uncontroverted evidence that had been presented to him in the courtroom that day, including live testimony from Gaza, that there was a genocide. And Judge White said, this is what he said. He said, every individual has to
We have that individuals have to confront genocide. Now, as
So what we have to do is think for a moment, reflect for a moment about the concept of in U.S. an international crime is itself an international crime. It is an individual crime. It is a crime that was recognized by what are known as the Nuremberg Principles of International Law, based on the Nuremberg trials that were adopted, those principles, by the UN General Assembly through the International Law Commission of the UN in 1950. And those principles established the seventh principle, recognizes complicity, as I said, as an individual crime. So that applies to genocide or to any other generally recognized principle of international law related to the definition of crimes, such as the Rome Statute and other court decisions of specialized tribunals, etc. And the bottom line is this, is that complicity applies, yes, to the executive branch, yes, to every single public official at the local, state, and federal level. That's why the Defense for Children International case was filed against three members of the executive branch, the president, the secretary of state, and the secretary of defense. But it also applies at every level of government. And it applies to every institution, public or private. And in the case of Stanford, which holds itself out as private, it too, its highest officials, the board of trustees, the president, the deans, all of those who make policy at the university have to be subjected to the following question with respect to their international responsibility, which is, what have they done or failed to do with respect to nationally responsible and liable.
Have its kind of position in aiding the U.S. You have into various military companies, into the strategic decisions that have aided and abetted genocide. So, yes or no, Stanford is complicit in the genocide in Gaza.
In my opinion, as an expert, it is absolutely patently clear that Stanford is complicit for its actions and failures to act, for everything that we know about Stanford's positioning in the world of policymaking, not just within the US, but around the globe. We know that this is where past and present and future presidents come to study and to play, where they come to talk about human rights. Stanford is to be held to account.
No further questions.
Hey,
Thank you, Camila.
hey, Delcy. Oh, where did the gavel?
Our next witness, a Palestinian student at the medical school, takes the stand.
Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You may proceed with questioning.
Could you begin by sharing why you're here with us today? Yeah, I think the reason that we're all here today, first off, I just want to say thank you to absolutely everyone that is here today. We see you and we love you from the deepest points of our hearts. This could not be possible without every single person here. So we're here today to, I'm here today to obviously support the cause. By no means is this anything new. As Palestinians, anybody could tell you that this has really been the reality for us for a very, very long time. Perhaps the rate at which stuff is happening is unprecedented, but this is by no means a new reality for us. I think it brings tears to my eyes to think about the fact that people are finally awake to the reality. So I'm here to talk about things from a Palestinian diaspora perspective, to show that our intersectional identities, to show that we come in all shapes and sizes and colors and yeah, I think all of us are really, really aware of all of the hurt, all of the massacres, all of the pain, the blood that is being shed in Palestine. To tears just thinking about it. Um, there are there's proof of life. There's lessons about how to live one's life in a graceful way, and um, the reality in Palestine is the fact that people eat with drones, um, children can go to schools, men have to fish for their kids out of the rubble. All of those are realities. I think we've been portrayed as victims, we've been portrayed as terrorists, but we're also everything in between, all of those things. And that always happens in Palestine. There's always life being taught in Palestine. There's always all of those things happening in Palestine. It is everything and nothing and everything in between all at once.
And could you share what has been happening here at Stanford, and how does that make you feel?
Yeah, since all of you guys know precisely what's going on main campus, I thought I'd share a little bit more about what goes on in the medical school side of things. The medical school, you know, we're a healing institution. We come into medicine wanting to heal. We come into medicine wanting to save lives, and I thought that was precisely what I was in the business to do as well. I think it's just a little. It's a lot of dehumanization going on in medicine because every day we show up, we learn about the sanctity of human life, we learn about the depths and 4 years of knowledge that we will use to save and to preserve the sanctity of human life. And then you see those same people who give us all of these lectures and the same people who tell us how important this is absolutely draw that line when it comes to the sanctity of human life, but in Palestine. So there's almost this split brain syndrome of, you know, that this is what you came here to do, yet they are conveniently turning a blind eye to it. I think Stanford Medicine has effectively, I think they've done a lot of things. They've put us in blazers to talk about the genocide that we see our people undergoing, made us talk about it in meeting rooms like it's some sort of intellectual conversation to have. They have forced us to fit all of these nice and tidy statistics into PowerPoints and presentations on top of everything else that we have to do to walk them through it, to walk other students through what we're going on. They forced us to dehumanize our statistics to only include women and children, as if the men of Gaza don't fish out hope out of the rubble, as if they're not here amongst us, Yusuf, his parents, everyone, as if they're not here amongst us teaching us how to live life merely by just existing. We've had to dehumanize our own men. We've had to dehumanize our own children. I think Stanford Medicine very much cornered us into that. In our curriculum for medicine, we learn a lot. We learn a lot about pain medication. We learn a lot about how to anesthetize patients. And when we were first learning about it, I had just read an article saying ketamine was being used to put patients to undergo amputations. So in my next lecture, I told them, I was like, hey, I don't see ketamine being on this patients that usually get put them under for major operations. They said, yeah, because you never put someone under using ketamine. And I was like, well, what could happen? There's no way it could happen. But isn't it happening right now? Is that not what we see in Gaza? Children getting their legs and their limbs cut off under ketamine, if anything. Right? If they were lucky enough to get anything that could subside that pain. So I think that's what the medical school has done. It's really dehumanized a lot of us. It's dehumanized the cause. It's also giving rise to doctors that have values of steel and doctors that will not bow down to any of that. Doctors that will continue to fight when it is not convenient. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Experts indicate that the definition of genocide in the UN Convention on Prevention and Punishment for genocide includes three crucial elements. If any of these factors is present, a genocide is taking place. After I briefly describe each one, can you say whether this is happening to your family? Is Israel killing the Palestinian people?
Undoubtedly so. For the last 75 plus years.
Is Israel causing serious bodily or mental harm to the Palestinian people?
Israel is causing severely bodily and mental harm to people. Harm that has not even been documented. Harm that has not even been conceived of to be put in medical textbooks. Harm that will not meet certain definitions because of how creative and how absolutely absurd it is. Yes, all of it.
Is Israel deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part of the Palestinian people?
Yes, Palestinians in Palestine and Palestinians in diaspora as well.
As mentioned before, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts are committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Given your experiences and those of your family, Do you think Israel has demonstrated its intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinian people?
Yes, I believe so.
What has Stanford done in response to this genocide?
What have they done in response to this genocide? I think they've given us some FaceTime as anesthetics, as just to kind of anesthetize the pain for a little bit. I think we've been getting a good bit of FaceTime, but I think things like that cannot be solved with FaceTime. They cannot be solved by mere emails and statements to be signed on. I think this is the kind of stuff that they can't just make go away with a meeting or two. What else have they done? We were hosting a Palestinian doctor actually 2 weeks ago, and she came to the School of Medicine to give a talk. Upon arrival, they reread the guidelines first, and nothing political. They mentioned nothing political, no mention of Palestine. This is somebody that we flew out of Jerusalem to Stanford to come give a talk. She's a psychiatrist. I implore you to go see her work. Her name's Samah Jabir. But her entire work has been about politicizing the mental health. The whole work is about talking about how the mental state is a personal one, but it's also a political one. And there is no way that you can tend to someone's mental illness without looking at the political situations that they've been in, right? And so she comes in and she's been getting all of these calls on what she should and shouldn't say. And she goes, I never thought in my life I'd be more scared to speak about Palestine in America than I am in occupied Palestine. This happened at Stanford, our so-called progressive West Coast, California-based university has made Palestinians born and raised in Palestine be more scared to talk here than they are under the actual control of IDF soldiers. So I think that's what Stanford has done in the response of genocide.
Is the U.S. complicit in genocide?
Yes.
And from the perspective of a healer, is Stanford fulfilling its responsibility to its students in response to this genocide?
Is Stanford fulfilling its responsibility to its students? Simply not. And not in terms of education, not in terms of the bare minimum requirements that they're supposed to be providing us with, not in terms of, I'm a medical student, I have a whole class on health policy, Palestine wasn't mentioned once. When we students took it upon ourselves to educate people in the medical school about this, since we thought our curriculum did not do it justice, we were called bloodthirsty, we were called behind our backs, people said we were disgusted, they were disgusted with the fact that we were going to be medical professionals one day. We have been, videos of us have been circulating up in administration, like we're in middle school. We have been refused from using our Stanford Zooms. They have tried to stop us from using our own laptops. And every step of the way, in every way we have decided to have a conversation in the medical school, we have had to fight for it. So the answer to the question is, are they successful in fulfilling those responsibilities? No, they're not.
No further questions.
Our next witness, a member of the Palestinian aid organization Al-Haq, takes the stand.
Okay, please state your name and occupation. My name is Susan Power, and I am the head of legal research and advocacy at Al-Haq, and I worked at Al-Haq for 10 years. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You may proceed with questioning.
Thank you. What does Al-Haq do as an organization? Al-Haq is an independent Palestinian non-governmental human rights organization based in Ramallah, West Bank. The United States support of Israel's current attack on Gaza continues to disrupt al-Haq's operation. Can you specify how Israel's relentless attack on Gaza has affected your organization's work? Due to Israel's continued bombing of the Gaza Strip, our field researchers continue to work on preliminary reports of the unfolding hostilities on the ground, but are not able to get required on-site documentation. How has Israel's attack on Gaza affected the lives of your organization's volunteers? Members and staff of Al-Haq in Gaza have been subjected to increased indiscriminate bombardment and displacement. Yeah, could you give us a specific example? Our legal research and advocacy officer, Ahmed Abufur, lost more than 60 members of his extended family since October 7th, who were indiscriminately bombed and killed in airstrikes. On October 18th, 5 of his cousins were killed, and on October 23rd, his cousin's 4-year-old child was injured in an airstrike and died the following day. In another airstrike on November 23rd, his cousin Rami Abufur, his wife and daughter were killed in the Abu Iskander area. Another daughter was in critical condition after she lost her leg. A further 13 members of his family in-laws were killed in another bomb strike on November 24th. Ahmed's eldest uncle, Fazi Abufur, was killed in the Sheikh Ridwan neighborhood of Gaza City. Fazi was in his house when shrapnel from a nearby bombing entered and hit him minutes before the troops started for the humanitarian pause. On December 13th, at least 50 members of Ahmed's extended family sheltering in the multi-city home of Bet Lavia were killed, although the exact number remains unknown because some remain under the rubble. The targeted house was the Mokhtar Abdullah Abufur. Several families were sheltering in his multi-story family home in the Bet Lavia area north of Gaza, close to the Kamal Adwan Hospital. Thank you. You mentioned that Al-Haq has field researchers as well. How have they been affected by Israeli attacks? Al-Haq continues to struggle to maintain contact with its 2 field members based in the Gaza Strip. Due to the latest communication blackout, we have not established communication in the 5 days prior to December 21st. In the south of Raqqa, the sister of our field researcher, Haris Zahid, lost her 3 children who were killed in a bombing attack on their home, leaving her in critical condition, requiring 3 days of surgery. Tariq and his family have since been displaced from his home in the south of Gaza after neighbors received a phone call from the Israeli forces to evacuate. He moved with his mother and in-laws in house in Khan Yunis and currently in the Zarat. His father, who is a cancer patient, was not able to leave and remained with his brother. On December 22nd, the Israeli army issued a map highlighting blocks for bombardment, including a block dangerously close to Karab, where Karab is located, and he is not prepared to leave with his family to Raqqa. How have you maintained communication, if at all? In Gaza City, the home of our field researcher, Mohammed Abu Rameh, was bombed, and the building housing a number of apartments was completely destroyed. He and his family fled to his sister's wife's house, which was subsequently bombed. In October, our organization lost contact with Mohammed for over 2 weeks, and when we regained contact, he and his family had fled to the south to Rafah. And due to communication blackout, it's difficult to retain regular contact. Has Al-Haq ever encountered a disruption to this degree? Because of the continuous bombardment, it is impossible for our field researchers to conduct field investigations. And at the moment, the organizations are collecting preliminary data for follow-up when hostilities subside. It is the first time in the 44 years history of Al-Haq that we have been unable to conduct fueled investigations due to the intensity and the scale of these attacks. No further questions.
Our next witness, a researcher from the Stanford Against Apartheid in Palestine Divestment Coalition, takes the stand.
Please state your name and occupation.
My name is Carlos Enrique, and I am a research organizer in Stanford Against Apartheid in Palestine, a coalition calling for disclosure and divestment from corporations involved in the genocidal activities of the Israeli settler state.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
What targets for divestment and disaffiliation has the SAP coalition identified?
SAP is currently pursuing divestment on Hewlett Packard, which is HP, Chevron, and Lockheed Martin. We are also pursuing divestment on the complicit industries represented by these three companies: apartheid technology, fossil fuels, and weapons manufacturers.
How is Hewlett Packard complicit in Israel crimes?
Yeah, so Hewlett Packard provides the sort of digital infrastructure that props up the apartheid regime. Namely, HP provides the servers upon which the Israeli government's population registry is stored. This population registry is a key part of Israel's apartheid regime that has fragmented the Palestinian people into exiles and refugees without status or rights in their country, second-class citizens of Israel who are discriminated against by more than over 60 racist laws, and Palestinian residents, not citizens, in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem under Israeli civil and military law.
And how is Stanford entangled in Hewlett Packard's practices?
Both William Hewlett and David Packer were Stanford students, and they founded HP while on campus. Since then, HP's dollars have been essential to Stanford's functioning. In 2001, the Hewlett Foundation donated $400 million to Stanford. At the time, it was the largest single gift to an American college or university. HP was also formerly an industrial affiliate of Stanford's Center for Design Research in the Engineering School.
Moving on to your next mentioned business, how is Chevron complicit in Israel's crimes?
Chevron participates in Israel's naval blockade of Palestine to serve their own business interests. They have ships in the Palestinian coast with a quote unquote safety zone enforced by severe human rights impacts, including attacks by the Israeli Navy on fishermen, unlawful arrest and arbitrary detention, and the denial of right to livelihood, as the vast majority of Palestinian fishing water has been made inaccessible. These movement restrictions have had a detrimental impact on the livelihood of Palestinian fishermen who do not have access to their fishing areas and whose boats and equipment are regularly confiscated by the Israeli Navy. The naval blockade has led to the total collapse of Gaza's fishing industry, which has gone from a time-honored tradition and respected profession into fishermen becoming one of the most marginalized and poorest working class in Gaza. They also directly pillage resources and internationally recognized crime from Palestine through gas extraction without conducting appropriate human rights due diligence to identify and prevent potential adverse human rights impacts.
And how is Stanford entangled in Chevron's practices?
Well, Chevron is an industrial affiliate of most programs under Stanford School of Sustainability, including a series entitled Chevron Energy Seminars. Chevron also funds the Chevron Fellowship in Energy, which provides select PhD students $80,000 in funding to focus on research that will, quote unquote, enable scalable innovation of current energy systems and aid development and deployment of energy systems of the future.
And moving on to the final corporation that you mentioned, how is Lockheed Martin complicit in Israel's crimes?
The world's largest weapon manufacturer, Lockheed Martin, directly supplies Israel with fighter jets used extensively to bomb Gaza. Israel also uses the company's transport planes to support the ground invasion of Gaza. Lockheed Martin manufactures Hellfire missiles for Israel's Apache helicopters, which are one of the main weapon types used in aerial attacks on Gaza. Some 2,000 Hellfire missiles were delivered to Israel sometime between October 7th and November 14th, including a Hellfire R9X missile, a version of the Hellfire that was developed by the CIA just for carrying out assassinations. Instead of exploding, the missile shreds its targets using blades, allowing for a direct hit without collateral damage. This was fired at journalists stationed near a hospital. A subsidiary of Lockheed Martin manufactures the helicopter used to transport Israeli soldiers in and out of Gaza. On January 8th, this subsidiary was awarded $18.3 million from US taxpayer money for continued work on the aircraft as provided to Israel. On an October 17th call with investors, Lockheed Martin CEO Jim Teichlet, quote, highlighted the Israel and Ukraine conflicts as potential drivers for increased revenue in the coming years.
Thank you for illuminating that for us. And so, how is Stanford entangled in Lockheed Martin's practices?
When asked by the Stanford Daily, a representative of the board of trustees said that Stanford had investment holdings in weapon manufacturers. Had no investment holdings in weapon manufacturers. To be clear, we have zero way of verifying this because Stanford refuses to disclose. That being said, we know Stanford still maintains strong ties to Lockheed Martin through affiliate status and research partnerships. Lockheed is a long-standing industrial affiliate of the Stanford Aeronautics and Astronautics Department, and Lockheed Martin has been actively embedded in Stanford's research since the mid 1900s.
Would you say that Stanford has met its duty to prevent and resist genocide?
I'll say that Stanford has failed in preventing and resisting genocide, instead has actively supported Israel's attack on Palestine through their investments and partnerships with companies clearly complicit in this ongoing genocide. Furthermore, Stanford's active refusal to disclose those connections openly indicate that Stanford actively attempts to curtail, to hide accountability on their duty to prevent genocide.
So, to make it clear to the court, would you say Stanford is complicit in genocidal actions?
Yeah, absolutely.
No further questions.
Our final witness, a Palestinian Gazan student, takes the stand.
Please state your name and occupation.
My name is Yusuf Anis Abu Hashim, and I'm a student here.
And who are you and why are you here today?
I'm a student that came here seeking education in computer science 3 years ago from Gaza. And I'm here to state everything I've lived in the 20 years I've lived in Gaza, in case anybody doesn't believe that we have been going through is a genocide.
What has been happening to your relatives in Gaza?
There is no, there's nothing that has been mentioned in the history of tragedies that hasn't happened to my relatives in Gaza. To start from closest to farthest, I have lost my house. My house has been shelled. The house that my family built in the 90s, even before Hamas was in Gaza. The house that we've lived in with my uncles and cousins for years. The house where I lived my whole life and had all of my dreams has been shelled. The high school I've been to has been completely destroyed. The middle school I've been to has been completely destroyed. The elementary school I've been to has been completely destroyed. The neighborhood I went to has been completely destroyed. These are places that hold at least 100,000 residents. My two of my cousins, one of them who got married last September, and I actually was in Gaza for his wedding, was buried under the rubble of their market in December. He's the son of my aunt. My other cousin, who's the son of my uncle, was also buried with him. He was in the market helping get food for other people. One of my cousins gave birth in the war with no hospital, with no anesthetics, with actually no doctors. My other cousin, who's a dentist, helped her give birth. One of my friends, who was in school with me, and who was in the year I spent in college in Gaza with me, got killed in his house in Rafah when Rafah was declared a safe zone. My nephews and nieces ate tree leaves when they couldn't find food in northern Gaza. Um, my sister, who was born in the 2008-2009 war, has been having constant and severe stress and panic attacks. Every time I or any of my family hear a plane, you have a sense to duck, you have a sense to run. I can't think of anything that did not happen, and most of these relatives are right now in tents under 40 Celsius, which is around 110 Fahrenheit, with little to no food. Everyone has lost their jobs, everyone has lost their education, and there's no end in sight.
And what has been happening here, and how does that make you feel?
Here at Stanford.
What's been happening at Stanford is what has been happening here from the administration is it's trying to play both sides, putting both sides. If one side tells you they're genocidal and one side, if it's raining outside, you put your head out of the window and you see if it's raining or not. What the university has been doing is just ignoring our right to humanhood. I've been sitting on meetings constantly with the president and provost and the clown of DEI, and having to explain that you're human every single time is painful. What's been happening here is that we see statements that don't align with what has been happening. And honestly, if nothing has been happening here, it would have been better. It's a bit painful to see that the focus is on the things that don't matter, and that we have a proverb in Arabic that says, "I'm pointing to the moon and the idiot is looking at my finger." Um, I don't know, what has been happening here is knocking down student protesters. The friends that sat here for 120 days of the sit-in were literally the only place felt safe and welcome on campus. And the university has tried to kick them out every single day, starting with Democracy Day. Um, they threatened them and still threaten them with OCS cases, with arrests. And they just, it seems as the university is viewing Palestinian activism as a club. There is really no understanding that this is a collective and these are people. And this is literally the community that Stanford has always been trying to foster, but have always failed at achieving. This is the biggest, most diverse community I've ever seen. And Stanford doesn't understand that if they knock down on some of the protesters here, some others will show up tomorrow. What has been happening What's been happening is just denial to our demands. It's denial to even sit down with us to understand what we're calling for. It's equating us with those who are harassing us and doxing us and hitting us with their cars. What's been happening here is just pretentious attempts to look good, just to avoid actual interrogations.
Yusuf, experts indicate that the definition of genocide in the United States Convention on the Prevention of and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide includes three crucial elements. If any of these factors is present, a genocide is taking place.
What are the three things?
Um, After briefly describing each one, can you say whether this is happening? I'll describe them. Is Israel killing the Palestinian people?
Yes, they've killed my cousin.
Is Israel causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to the Palestinian people?
Yes, they've caused my sister severe panic attacks, and they've caused countless numbers of my cousins to be hit with shrapnels.
Is Israel deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part of the Palestinian people?
Yes, they forced my niece to go through famine.
As mentioned before, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts are committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethical or racial or ethnical or racial or religious group. Given your experiences and those of your family, do you think that Israel has demonstrated its intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinian people?
I do believe so, and I believe that they have shown the action of it and not just the intention.
What has the U.S. done in response to this genocide?
They've sent weapons to support it. Um, I was 8 when the gaslit operation happened. I was 12 when the 2012 escalation happened. I was 14 when the 2014 war happened. I was 18 when the 2021 war happened, and I've seen bombs that say made in US on them. I've seen unexploded rockets that say made in US on them. I've seen different numbers and names of shrapnels and rockets and explosives and mines that take you back to Lockheed Martin or Boeing or something like this. The US has sent weapons. The US has sent support. The US has sent political experts.
So is the U.S. complicit in this genocide?
The US is complicit and actively committing this genocide.
Thank you, Yusuf. No further questions.
We'll now move into a final closing statement. Today, we have elucidated not just the US's, but Stanford links to the ongoing genocide in Palestine. We have heard from an expert on the pain and the trauma that her family, her community is experiencing. We have heard from experts on the ground of the NGOs giving aid to Palestinians when our governments have utterly desecrated them. We have heard from researchers on Stanford's own campus who are in community and allied with the Palestinian movement. And we've heard from a student who has lived his entire life in Gaza and have seen it razed to the ground. The people are on the side of justice, even when the governments refuse. When the bombs say made in US, the road traces back to Stanford University. And so we have one ask, that the community here, the community that gives its labor, that gives its money, that gives its time, that gives Stanford its prestige, that gives all that which Stanford stands for, that makes Stanford, we ask them to find Stanford complicit in genocide.
We have now reached the end of our trial proceedings, with all witnesses having been questioned and statements by prosecutors given. It is time for us, the people, the jury of this people's court, to vote. On the count of complicity in genocidal actions by Israel against Palestine and Stanford's direct involvement, we find Stanford guilty. 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 It seems we have the verdict.
By a unanimous decision by the jury and the people, Stanford has been found guilty on all counts of complicity in genocide.
As a consequence of this charge, Stanford is required by the people to disclose their investments.
That's right.
And not only disclose, but divest from Hewlett Packard, Chevron, and Lockheed Martin. No tech for apartheid, no plundering of indigenous land. Stop the U.S. war machine.
Disclose. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest. Disclose. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest. Disclose. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest. Disclose. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest. Disclose. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest. Disclose. Divest. We will not stop. We will not rest. Woo!
We want to thank everyone for showing out and showing up to our People's Tribunal. And to close us off, I want to bring back up Camilo, who represents not just, well, there's all of us here at Stanford, and there's also the entire Bay community, the entire Bay Area community, those we are in solidarity with all across the nation. And some closing words from Camilo, who, if you have anything to offer from the greater Bay Area, and any support. And thank you all again.
Thank you. I just want to say how much of an honor it is, what a deep honor it is to be able to be here and to stand in solidarity in the name of the National Lawyers Guild of not just the San Francisco Bay Area chapter, but of the national organization and of our sister organizations around the world, to the International Association of Democratic Lawyers and the International Association of People's Lawyers. We stand with you. We stand here in defense of the human right that was articulated today so powerfully in the testimony, which is the most fundamental human right of all, the right to be human and to be treated with dignity as a human being. The right of humanhood, as our compañero shared with us. International crimes of this kind trigger the rights of victims to truth, justice, and reparations. These can be collective and individual, material and symbolic. This means what is referred to generally as a transitional justice process, a truth and reconciliation process, restorative justice. This means Stanford must take the first step in that direction and activate and fulfill its duties of full public disclosure, transparency, and divestment, as to Hewlett Packard, as to Lockheed, as to Chevron, and beyond, including all research and activities related to the Pentagon and the U.S. intelligence community, CIA, NSA, FBI, off campus. There is also a positive duty of reparation and compensation to the people of Gaza and Palestine and to the Palestinian community here and beyond. This means a comprehensive, independent assessment that is needed of each and every dimension of Stanford's activities, contracts, collaborations, and investments to determine the nature and degree of their implication in the ongoing crimes in Gaza and Palestine and their levels of complicity. Venceremos!